Okay. Good morning. Hopefully this is live. I never know, and I never know if you can hear me. So if anybody drops in the chat, that would be great to know if you can hear me. Let me check that real quick, and then we will get it started. I have been, if it's not noted on the slides, I've been working with Brene Brown and Jeff Van Vonderen's material on shame. And who knew that shame could be something that you would really get excited about, because you know what, you can deal with it and it's fixable and you don't have to live that way the whole time. So let me make sure that, hang on just a second, all you beloved people, let me make sure I'm actually on and that you can hear me. Yes, auto captions are being generated, which means you can hear me. Okay, so let's get started with this. And this is the secret life of shame, because shame has a lot of secrecy to it. There is no way around it that we are not doing this in secret. So as we move into this, I want you to keep thinking about your life, how these things have happened for you, and what it looks like for you. So shame, here we go. And it's going to build a lot on the areas that we've already worked on. So here's the first thing I want to start with from Brene Brown, is to believe that if we want meaningful and lasting change, we need to get clear on the differences between shame and guilt and call for an end to shame as a tool for change. That also means moving away from labeling. So we use shame as a tool for change, trying to get people to change. Is we may say, oh, shame on you, or that's shameful, or you should be ashamed of yourself. And we're going to talk about why that happens. First, let's move into guilt. And we need to really define the difference between guilt and shame. And there is a huge difference. Once you get this is the difference between misinformation and lying. Same kind of idea. It's not all the same category. But once you get this, you will understand a little bit better on what's happening in your family, what's happening with the addictive behaviors, and what's happening with your loved one. So let's move right on. Guilt. So guilt is adaptive and helpful. It's holding something we've done or failed to do up against our values and feeling psychological discomfort. So guilt is a flare. Guilt bursts is what happens. It's a flare that says something has gone wrong. So maybe I have hit your car in the parking lot and I feel guilty about it. I leave you a note. I leave my phone number. I leave things there so that you can get a hold of me so I can make it right. Okay. So what we do is we go, we say what we did. We say we apologize for it. We may ask for forgiveness. And in typical AA tradition, we want to make amends. What can I do to make it right? So with my sister, I used to borrow clothes out of her closet, which made her very angry. And I got called out on it and I needed to stop. So I put the things back, offered to buy her something else, and to stop doing that behavior. That was guilt. That's over. Once I've said, I'm sorry, please forgive me, that's over, right? Guilt is that flare. We take care of it and it's over. So what if the person says, nope, like my sister, I'm going to hold the grudge forever. This is wrong. You shouldn't have done it. And, I can't forgive you. Now, she didn't really say she couldn't forgive me, but if she had said that, I can't forgive you, I'm going to hold the grudge forever, and I'm going to keep niggling you about borrowing my clothes when we were teenagers together. Well, it's still, hear this really loud and clear, it's still over for me, right? Because what does God say? He says, if you come to the altar and you have someone that you have not forgiven, leave your offering at the altar and go make amends, do the forgiveness work. He doesn't say keep going back, keep going back. He does say keep forgiving people, but once you have asked for forgiveness, made an amends, get that straight, then if they no longer welcome you, you shake the dust off your sandals and you go on. You have done your part. God throws the sins from the as far as the east is from the west. He will forgive you. So even if there's somebody in your life who has not forgiven you, you can live as forgiven as long as you have done the steps. And that's where AA is really strong. Al-Anon is really strong. This is what you do in the amends process. So while I think there's many paths to recovery and many paths to working through your process, not everyone uses the same path, but this is an area where I think 12 steps are really strong. So guilt is about behavior. Hold on to that word. Guilt is about behavior. Now, it's over for me, right? I've gone, I've said, I'm sorry for taking this sweater. I'm sorry for stretching it out. Let me buy you a new one, or let me do something that'll make it different, right? Something that will help you. Okay. Well, is it over? Here's the problem with people who love folks who have addictive behaviors. We often go back into ourselves and say, okay, I broke it. I apologized. I asked what's next. I made an amends, but how could I be so stupid? Why would I continue to do that? What is it that makes me do those things over and over again? What's wrong with me? Why can't I figure this out? Why do I still keep doing this? Why do I still keep choosing partners who can't support me, who put me down, who make me feel unworthy? I'm just bad, so maybe that's the person I should be with. Now we have switched it. Now we have walked into shame. So here is the main difference. Guilt is about something I did and a behavior, and it's a flare. When we walk into shame, it is a mindset. It is not, I did something bad. It is, I am bad. Okay? Totally different idea than I did something bad. I am bad. So here's the definition of shame according to Brené Brown. Shame is intensely painful feeling or experience, believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. Okay, so with guilt, we weren't giving up connection, right? We were just saying, okay, I did that. Yes, I need to make an amends for it. Let's change it. With shame, we are walking away from connective. It is not adapted. It's a mindset. It's not a behavior. It is saying that I am defective. I am inadequate. I am not available as a full human being. Do you see the difference? So there's a huge shift. And let's talk about what the character of God is. Let's go back to when we hold on to this and we don't forgive ourselves. So here's the issue when we're dealing with someone in an addictive behavior. And we're going to talk in depth about this. So hang on. I want you to hang on to the video because we're going to talk about the hidden rules that help us, one, behave this way and how to get out of it. So when we've got someone who is using substance, workaholism, whatever, in addictive behavior, then we often believe that our changes, listen to this closely, our changes we can control and change them. Now, our changes can affect them, but that we can control and change them, or we can control the environment enough to shift this addictive behavior. Or if we do enough, perform enough, or perform correctly enough, then this will all be okay. That's where we begin to have the shame is, I'm not doing enough. If I was a better mother, if I was a better wife, if I was a better daughter, a better friend, a better worker, then this would not be going this way. But God says a couple different things. And we talked in the last couple sections about self-compassion and love. We talked about God's character. So we see God's character in Colossians 3:13. Bear with each other, forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord has forgiven you. Okay, look between the lines. It is not that we are not going to have grievances. It is not that we are not going to need to forgive each other, right? It is When we do that, when we cross the line, when we trample on somebody's boundary, we are to ask for forgiveness just as the Lord forgives us. So we're never going to be in a relationship where we're perfect. We're never going to be in a space where we don't make these mistakes. If you read between the lines, God expected us to have these issues, and he taught us what to do about it. So it's guilt, it's this flare. Did God ever say we're bad? No. He said we're fearfully and wonderfully made. He said we are his beloved. We are his creation. Was there a fall? Do we need to repent? Do we have sin? Yes, that's how he's giving us to prepare for it. So then with God's character in Psalm 32:5, we hear, then I acknowledge my sin to you. Could be to God, could be to another person. That's why God tells us to be in community. And did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to you, the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. The Lord keeps forgiving. He's our model, right? So in Matthew 14, for if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. So here's the key with this, that we're not talking about boundaries. That's a whole nother lesson. Forgiveness is for you, and forgiveness keeps you out of shame. Compassion, self-compassion, forgiveness for self, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about one other step that builds resilience. That's what Brene Brown is all about, is building that resilience. Is this keeps you out of shame, because not only can somebody else shame you, but if you are already shaming yourself, then guess what? How you're seeing the world. You are seeing the world through this shame grid. So if I already think I'm unworthy, that I don't do things right, that I'm a poor mother, then when somebody says to me, like they did yesterday, well, no wonder he doesn't want to be in the house with you. If you try and control him like this, he doesn't want to be anywhere near you. That is a shaming statement. Now, why did that person give me that shaming statement? Because I was holding them accountable to something they said they were going to do. So to get out of that, they were shaming me. We're going to talk about these unwritten rules in the family here in just a little bit. So they shamed me to shut me down. They're shutting me down, saying, you're a bad mom. No wonder he doesn't want to be here. And if I was listening to you say this, I wouldn't want to be here either. Which, if I thought I was a bad mom, that would hit my shame grid. And I would begin to say, oh, you're right. I shouldn't have asked you to be accountable for this. I shouldn't have asked you to take care of this. You're right. I'll just handle it. Do you see where we're going with this? So here's the secret life of shame. It's not that people are not going to say shaming things to you. The question is, do you let them in, right? And do you already have a shame grid that says, I am that way? So when we look at this, shame is the opposite of our three basic needs that we talk about in setting boundaries. We have three basic needs, which are the exact opposite of these. So shame says you're worthless, you're alone, and you're unloved. It says a lot of other ugly things. And I hope I'm not hitting too hard on your shame grid, because we're going to talk about the good stuff. Hang out with me just a little bit longer. It says you're lacking, you're defective, you're worthless, you're unacceptable. You need to be fixed. Now, do we say that to our person who is dealing with addictive behaviors? Are we saying that? You're defective, you're unlovable, you're unacceptable the way you are. You need to be fixed. And we can communicate this all without words. There are just one or two ones that we speak out loud, but a lot of times we communicate this without words. Like, if I hold this idea that if I'm a good mom, then my son will take care of all of his needs. He will make sure that he has his driver's license intact. He will make sure that he has all the legal documents. He will make sure that he has all those things. Because if he doesn't, then I obviously am not doing my job. It's not about him as a later teen taking care of himself. It is about me. Did I parent him well enough to know how to do this? So I've locked myself in shame. So our three basic needs are the exact opposite, right? We are worthy. because God made us worthy, right? The death on the cross made us worthy. We're not alone because God says, I'm before you, beside you, behind you at all times. And we're not unloved because he loves us unconditionally. Now, we may not be able to get that from everyone in our lives, but we know there is a higher power that can communicate with us. He also said, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. It's not that you're not going to create issues. It's not that you're not going to have problems. It's not that some of these things aren't for your growth, but to put ourselves in this shame box and then to be shamed from the outside, wow, that hits up against our greatest fears. So here are our 10 greatest fears. Abandonment, not good enough, going crazy, loss of relationship, fear of failure, displacing someone, phony or imposter, not mattering, fear of emptiness, and being shamed. So these are fears that surround addictive behavior. When we have addictive behavior or when we have codependent behavior, it works both ways. We don't want any of these things to happen. So as a person exhibiting codependent behavior, then I am trying to control you so that you will be happy, because if you're happy, then I'm happy. And then we have to stay locked in this dance that I have to create this scenario where all goes well so that you're happy, so that I'm happy, so that I'm powerless. I'm giving everything over to you, because if I don't create the scenario, if I don't perform well and you're not happy, then I'm miserable. You see kind of the convolutedness of all this? It gets a little confusing on what's going on. It gets very convoluted as we move through this process. Now, here's the next step in this process is we as family systems participate in a lot of shaming. And a lot of it is unspoken. So we're going to camp out here for a little bit because a lot of this is totally and completely unspoken. All right. And we're going to camp in this area for just a little while. When we look at the unspoken nature of shame, there are several things that we talk about out loud shaming. Now, this is sometimes really prevalent, but it is the smallest unit of shaming, is this out loud shaming. So this can be direct name calling. This can be what happened to me the other day, to where there was a comparison. If you behave this way, then no wonder they want to be out of the house. There's also character assassination of, yeah, you're just not living up to our expectation. So when we talk about shame in family systems, we're talking about shame that is already there. If you were a child and you played the game Ants in the Dark, okay? So maybe you played the game Ants in the Dark and you're crawling around and one person is it and they're trying to get other people before they get found out on who they are, right? Well, the ants in the dark are crawling around in the dark, right? If I turn on the light, the ants are still there. If I turn off the light, the ants is still there. Turning on the light and looking at shame does not cause the shame not to be there. It was already there. That's why we talked about the shame grid that is already happening. It's already there. So let's talk about some of the unspoken types of shame. So one of them is performance. Good moms don't let their children drive off with license plates that are not correct for their car. Good moms make sure that their child has everything together when they go to the DMV to get their driver's license. Good moms pack a healthy lunch. They don't put Doritos and gummies and peanut butter and jelly in there. They always pack apples and oranges and not even bread, because that's not really healthy, right? So that's an unspoken rule. That's a performance rule, that if I don't perform well, not only can somebody else shame me saying, why would you put that stuff in your kid's lunch? You can also shame yourself. And as a mom, I am totally guilty of doing that. So another unspoken rule is about boundaries. I've had this happen in my life where somebody came to me and said, you walked all over my boundaries. You didn't respect me. You didn't respect what I needed. You didn't respect what needed to happen. Well, I can't respect your boundaries if I don't know what they are. If they're common to humanity boundaries, that I'm not going to physically harm you, or I'm not going to take things that are not mine, yeah. But if you have a particular boundary that says this spoon in the kitchen always resides in this place all the time, and if it's out of place, it is very stressful for me, I'm happy to respect that, but I have to know what it is. So when we're dealing with folks with addictive behavior and in the family system around those, if you're setting boundaries, they have to be clear and they have to be things that you can uphold. So somebody has to know your boundaries. So there are also things that when you say them out loud, they sound inappropriate, but they fall under the can't talk rule. So we can't talk about the fact that dad goes to weekend jail. We can't tell anybody about that. And so we're going to tell the children that he's away for the weekend working. That's a total mixed message, gives a very confusing message to the child on, we have another rule that says we don't lie, but then we also have another rule that says we can't talk, because if the neighbors knew, if somebody knew about that, that would be really bad. So in that system, the can't talk rule then competes with the don't lie rule, and it's confusing at best for the child. And so then you get to the problem of okay, so can't win. Then you come up with the can't win rule. Well, I'm not supposed to lie about where dad is because that's not good, but I can't talk about it to the neighbors because then I will shame myself and mom and everybody in the family. So now I have these two competing rules. So you have these competing rules. So it's kind of like, if I'm going to teach a class at Sunday school, right? Well, the can't win rule is, if I'm going to serve God, then I can't make anybody unhappy. How is that possible? There's always somebody who may not be on the same page or same place, and there may be somebody unhappy. So it's kind of like the idea, it's not, is in some families, it's better to be nice than to be honest. Now that really competes with don't lie, right? How do you do all that? So these hidden rules also, here's another big one of, so say I hauled off and slugged one of my kids, right? And then my husband calls the police. And I say, oh, you're ruining my career. You're ruining my ministry. You're ruining everything that I'm working towards because you called the police. And so what I'm saying to him is, because you noticed that I was doing bad behavior and did something about it, you are now the problem. Think about it. What's the problem? I hauled off and slugged one of my kids. It was inappropriate. It was non-available as a parent. And my husband stepped in to help correct that problem, right? Hitting the child was the problem, not my husband responding in a way that is, in many families, adequate to deal with that. I'm not saying that you need to bring police into all your business, but as an example, I wanted to catch your attention with that because it is a height of an example that the problem was not that the police were called. That may be the solution to getting everything to calm down, to get wraparound services for the family, to get counseling for me. The problem was that I hauled off and hit the child. What I made the problem out to be, because I was ashamed, I'm looking through my shame grid, I'm shaming the family. The problem was that my husband noticed, that the child noticed. So if you're stuck in that situation in an addictive family behavior scenario, to where if you notice something, you become the problem, that's something we're going to talk about later on how to look through that and figure out the way to handle that differently. Because what is the problem? This can be about money. You know, we don't make enough money and you keep spending and we can't afford these things. Well, the problem is either you don't make enough money, you don't manage the budget, but since you noticed, now you are the problem. So then the other thing that we talk about is these nonverbals, the eyebrow raise, the unspoken rules, the questions that are disrespectful. So disrespectful questions. If I ask you, well, how is that going to get paid? And you already feel shame about not producing the money, then suddenly this is a written rule that says you don't ask those questions. Don't ask those questions because I don't have a good answer for you. And it makes me feel small. And so now I'm going to start attacking you and making you the problem in that area. There's a couple other ones in there that adults have different rules from children, that women are to take care of the family and men don't have those kind of responsibilities. They go out and work. These rules are only truly problematic when we get to this area, that if I perform well enough, I can make you okay. And if you perform well enough, you can make me okay. Then we get lockstepped into this. And especially when we don't know what the unwritten rules are, we're over here doing this. We are raising the efficiency of the family by saying, I will just take care of it. I will make this happen. I can handle it. I will control the whole situation. When we're raising the efficiency of the family like that, we are in pretend land. And I love Neverland, right? I love Peter Pan. I love going to plays. I love being in pretend land when it's appropriate. But what we're being told is, by those unwritten rules and by trying to raise the efficiency of the family, by handling it all, by controlling the uncontrollables, by controlling the addictive behavior, by pouring out the alcohol bottles, by calling in late to work, by helping them at work because they're workaholics, we're told that what we're seeing is not real, what we're thinking is not real, and what we're feeling is not real, and what we're hearing is not real. Okay, we're told that if we bring that up, then we are the problem, and we need to just go back to being more efficient, right? So when you say something in this situation, you become the problem. So let's go back over here. When you become the problem, you hit up against your own shame grid, and you begin to think to yourself, maybe I am worthless. Maybe I am alone. Maybe I am unloved. I can't perform as well as they want. And the unwritten rule is I'm darned if I do and darned if I don't. So I might as well just give up. This is what a lot of our loved ones who deal with substance abuse deal with, is I can't please you by doing things that help me, and I can't please you by doing things that you feel are wrong, and I'm an embarrassment to you, so I might as well just give up, and I'm going to hide behind my shame grid because I can't win. I just can't win. And then we trigger one more time. We trigger all these greatest fears, and then the person who is in the role of raising the efficiency of the family just gets into high gear, takes over, and starts moving even faster. They may be taking on a second job. They may be adding to their list of cleaning and caring for the family. And guess what happens when they get to that point, when they're adding to the finances, the parenting, the social, the job, the housework? Then you get the person who is shaming themselves so much, and we did a whole series on anger, so go back and look at that one. You get the person who is shaming themselves so much that they start exploding in anger, or they go inside and do that frozen anger. And they are unhappy, not nice people to be around, because they live in pretend land, that they are told they're the problem because they can't perform. Here's the sad thing. It's the same thing happening for the person with the addictive behavior. They are told they're not performing well, they are shamed, and they go into pretend land, and then they're telling themselves they don't see, they don't hear, they don't feel, they don't think. And that's what we work on in the Dancing with Joy program is what is that person thinking? We spend a lot of time in an analysis of what is that person with the addictive behavior thinking? What is that? What are you thinking? What would they be thinking if they chose to do other behaviors? How could that shift? So we spend a lot of time there. But this shame piece is really important that it starts with you, just like self-compassion. So Van Vonderen has a great quote. His quote is, "The truth is never the problem. The problem is the problem." All right? That is really hard to hear sometimes because it's much easier to pin it on the person closest to you. If my husband is really struggling at work, he may come home and be angry with me or my sons. Not because he's really angry with us, but something that is a trigger set him off and it's compounded over the day. Zig Ziglar used to have this saying that, hey, the cop pulls you over in the morning, then you are rough with your secretary is rough with her assistant, the assistant goes and yells at the driver of the delivery truck, the driver of the delivery truck goes home and yells at his kid, and the kid kicks the dog. It just rolls downhill when we're in this self-shaming process and we're shaming each other. So what does the Bible say about that? Ephesians 4:25 says, "Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of the same body." So nice is better than honesty? Not sure that's true. Here's the problem with unsaid rules. You may have intentionally carried rules from your family of origin into your present family. You may carry them from another system. The issue is to sit down. This is a journal exercise. Sit down and think about the unspoken rules in your household. So the spoken rule in my household was when my father came to pick you up, you were on time. You were always on time. Now, the unspoken rule was when we were using the car and we needed to pick mom up from work, she often got forgotten. We weren't thinking about it. It wasn't as big a deal. We didn't need to go get her. Why was that? There was a weight of importance of the consequences of that. The other unspoken rule in my house was if you could just talk about it, it would all work out. Everything would be fine. I know y'all have been around on this earth long enough to know sometimes talking about it isn't the answer. Sometimes you need to let it rest. Sometimes you need to take action. Sometimes you need to leave it alone. Sometimes you actually need to write back and forth to each other. So those are some of the unspoken rules. Another unspoken rules could be children should be seen and not heard. We sometimes say that out loud, but when we get to these unspoken rules, it's best to make a list and figure it out, because here's where you don't want to be. Often in families, we will use shame to hold the family together, right? If you loved me, you would. If you cared about this family, you would show up for dinner on time. If you cared about this family, you would make more money. If you were a good wife, I would have dinner on the table when I got here. If you were the child that I expected, you would have straight A's and be the quarterback on the football team. If you were the person that I needed you to be, you would keep moving up the corporate ladder. So what we've done with a shame-based glue is hooked it to performance and behaviors. And what we found out was, guilt does focus on behaviors, but shame focuses on you are. How are you? Who are you? Whose are you? So when we have a glued together shame-based family, it's one of those scenarios when the holidays come around, you think, oh, it's important for me to be there, and they will call me and say they want me to be there, and that they'll say it's okay not to be there, but they'll call and they'll say, we really want you here, and can you make it? We're making your favorite Jell-O salad, we're making tuna fish casserole, we're making sure that we have those cookies you really like. So if you go, you're going to go and you may not enjoy your time, but you're going to try and do all the right behaviors. Eat the cookies, maybe eat the tuna fish salad, the Jello salad that you don't like anymore. Make sure that you smile and talk about pleasant things and all that. And then when you get overwhelmed, you may act out a little bit and say something, oh, you may criticize or sarcastic, and you'll be driving home thinking, I didn't want to go in the first place, and then I acted like a person I didn't like, and I ate things I didn't want. I'm so confused on why I'm showing up there. Whereas a family that is non-shame based says, oh, so happy to see you. We're going to accommodate your needs, and you're going to be there for ours, and we're going to have a great party. We're going to celebrate and have a great time. We're going to be sad to see you go. You're going to drive home going, oh, I wish I could have stayed longer. That was such a wonderful place to be. And it will be, you got affirming messages about you, and they got affirming messages about them. And maybe you talked about some hard issues. Maybe you talked about the aging of an older parent. Maybe you talked about some financial issues that needed to be dealt with, but you didn't send shaming messages back to each other. If you would just, if you could, if you will be. That's one way to know you're in a shame response, is when you send those style of messages. Now, what can you do about this? Here's the key. And in the Dancing with Joy program, we talk a lot more about how to do this. And we can really sort out where those messages are coming from and the unwritten rules, and get real clarity on the structure that you want to create. So in Dancing with Joy, we create clarity, then we take ownership of what's ours, and then we look at the structure that you want to create instead of your unintentional structure. So as we're moving forward, stop supporting on the outside what you don't support on the inside. When you look at this, when you look at shame, none of us in our families would want to support fear and blame and disconnect. Empathy, it is really hard. If you put shame in a petri dish and poured empathy on top of it, it would be really hard for shame to continue. Empathy is the courage to connect, courage to have compassion. And we talked about self-compassion. So compassion is and suffering, just like the passion of the Christ on the cross. So when I go to my child who is hurting because his girlfriend broke up with him, put my arm around him and sit with him. Let him know that I'm there. I don't have an answer. I don't even really need to share a story. Sit with him and show that I understand what it's like to suffer like that, that I understand that this is suffering and this feels awful. And I'm in compassion with him. That's the same kind of compassion we need to show ourselves, because shaming statements, unwritten rules, and shaming actions hit us hard when we are already shaming ourselves. If we are not already shaming ourselves, we're able to do several things. And that's what Brené Brown recommends. That we practice self-kindness over self-judgment. When we use judgment against ourselves, then we have to think of justifications. So I'm judging myself for not performing well as a mom. And then I have to think, well, I was tired and we needed income and I had to bring in more money and I just couldn't be there. I have to judge myself instead of using kindness and saying, that didn't go as well as I wanted. I know there's an opportunity to do it differently the next time. Let's think back to the what's that happened before we got to this space. Then, as I said, in the self-compassion, this is all common to man. So we're not experiencing, and the biblical text says we're not experiencing anything that is not common to man, and God will show us a way out. So if you want to see that, go look at the self-compassion one. God will show us a way out. And this that I'm experiencing is not unique to me. Having a child that is doing addictive behaviors, having cancer, having a spouse that may not be showing up, having to parent more, having to raise more funds. Those are things that are not uncommon. This is common to humanity. I can and will get through it. So that's part of it, and not isolating. So engaging with others. The other piece is to have mindfulness. mindfulness, to be aware of what we're doing. Oftentimes we rush so fast that we're not aware of what we're doing. That goes back to the unwritten rules. The unspoken, unwritten rules, get out, write those down, figure out what those are, and then separating the people from the problem. So as Brene talks about this, she talks about the 4 elements of shame resistance. So understanding the triggers, what is your shame grid? What leaves you looking like this so that you are looking through a grid instead of seeing what it really is? Having that critical awareness, what is the problem? What exists, what works, and what impacts it? So in the Dancing with Joy program, we're looking at the clarity of the problem. Where is my ownership in it? With a late teen, should I be making sure he gets to the DMV? No, it's not my responsibility. And what impacts it? What impacts is it going to have if he doesn't get there? Is he going to be able to go off to college? Is he going to be able to manage himself without a proper licensing? Yes. Are those impacts that affect me? Yes. If I shame him, does that get him to do it? Not necessarily. Does it damage our relationship? Yes. Then then reaching out. So this non-isolation. And we talked about that with the heart of peace. If we are reaching out to the other person in a way that we are still at war with them, they can feel it. They know that we're just covering. We know when somebody plasters on a fake smile and says we're just covering. So figure out what it is that is helpful help. So remember, unhelpful help is something that somebody can do for themselves or they didn't want done in the first place. Helpful help is asking and saying, what would help you get to the DMV? What do you need in place? Is there something I can do behind the scenes to help? That is helpful help. And then speaking about it. In great AA Al-Anon tradition, it is secrets keep us sick. That doesn't mean you need to tell everybody what's going on, because that can be shaming too. But you're trusted people to call and say, hey, I'm dealing with a situation. I'm dealing with all kinds of things. And here's a list of things that people are often afraid to speak up about. Somebody leaving the family, infertility, flunking out of school, hiding in recovery, bankruptcy, addiction in the family. If you've got something that you think is shaming, bring it out to someone that you trust and see what they think. Because here's what's happening for a lot of us is we are putting on this show on the outside. See the pretty colors on the outside? We all, as I said many times, we all look in the grocery store. If you come up to the grocery store, oh, I'm fine. I've got a son heading off to college. I've got one that's in sophomore in high school. My husband's doing great at his job. Everything is fine. If I am not getting any of my needs met, if I'm not feeling loved, worthy, and not alone, then I'm empty on the inside. So I'm putting on this facade on the outside. This is what drugs and alcohol, workaholism, codependency, all those things allow us to do, is we put on this coating. It's kind of like the coating on the outside of an M&M. We put on this coating and we say, I'm fine. I've got this going on. Everything's fine. But inside, I am so needy. What does that make us vulnerable to? Makes us hugely vulnerable to shame. We are stuck in the jungle. We are not able to share with anybody what's important to us and what we're feeling. So we're not able to do this fact check. So here's the fact check. We're not able to do the fact check that says, okay, am I judging myself? Am I isolating myself? Am I over-identifying with this? So I'm divorced. I'm always going to be divorced. I'm a divorcee. That's my whole life. That's how I identify. Or I lost a job, or I've lost several jobs, and I'm always going to be a loser. That's how I identify. So I have made myself the problem, right? So when we look at those two circles, what we're looking at is, here's where we get really frustrated with other people, is when we go to them and we say, okay, looks like everything's okay for you on the outside. So I want to be with you. I want to be nurtured by you. I want to be part of you. but they're empty on the inside. You can't give what you don't have. And we talk a lot about this with boundaries and with love and self-compassion, is you can't give what you don't have. So if your inside is empty, but your shell looks great on the outside, man, you're really set up for coming to this person. This is often what we do when we seek out somebody else in a codependent relationship. So we seek out this person who looks great on the outside. We're like, oh, they can give me what I need, and they can be the person for me, and they can be efficient in the family, and they can help me meet my unmet needs, and they can complete me. But we get into the relationship about 6 months down the relationship, and it's empty. Why is it empty? It's empty because they didn't have that to begin with. It's just a shell. It's just performance. So as we wind this up, let's go back to what you can do. This is not it. Raising the efficiency of the family is not it in this way. What you can do is get out of the land of pretend, right? We're getting out of the land of pretend. And this is from Brené Brown. Empathy is a hostile environment it should say, a hostile environment for shame. So instead of this shame-based family that keeps all of these secrets and has to keep, see, these guys don't even have mouths, has to keep their mouths shut to keep all of these secrets, we are in this family where empathy is there. And with empathy, we build shame resilience. And with shame resilience comes all of these things, plus this self-care, self-compassion, and separating the people from the problem. As you look at this, I want to encourage you to hop on the Sober on Purpose podcast, and also to join me on the Rise from Addiction Facebook group. I never get that name right. I may have to change it. Rise from Addiction Facebook group. And those are places where we love on you, we pray for you, we take care of you in a healthy way. And the Sober on Purpose podcast, I'm interviewing some great guests. And a lot of what folks have asked me is, what do I tell the kids? How do I say things to the kids if you've got addictive behavior going on in your household? Looking at that is one of the hardest things I had to do as a mom. Join us. Some of the next on the Sober on Purpose podcast will be around kids. So you can find them on Apple, on Spotify, on Amazon, on all of those places. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much.